everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Veil Tarot and Astrology. My name is Candice Marie. Thanks for joining me. It is the end of November. Hopefully you guys, those of you who celebrate Thanksgiving in the States, had a happy holiday. We are going to be taking a look at some of the more prominent transits for December of 2022. Do me a favor, if you are not already subscribed, make sure you hit the button below, leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, and let me know if you're a new subscriber and where you're tuning in from. It would be nice to hear from you. Yeah, wow, I can't believe it's December. It's still kind of like mind-boggling, you know? So I'm going to touch on quite a few transits today. Some of you guys have already caught most of these if you saw my December 2022 horoscopes. If you haven't seen that, check it out. I take all of the 12 signs through a lot of these transits for the month ahead and show you in the chart what's going to be going down and give you my predictions. This is more general. We're going to take a look at how some of the planets are moving. We've got some retrogrades, we've got some planets stationing, and we have a whole lot of mutable squares. Also big news for the month of December, we're going to be taking a look at Mercury going retrograde. So it's kind of like, I feel like we just came out of one recently. Yes, the beginning of 2023 will start with a Mercury retrograde, but do not fear. The retrogrades are here to kind of help us out. As always, I will break these down monthly. So if you're looking for like a full moon or a new moon report, just some food for thought on like the Mercury retrograde, that'll be a separate video that will be coming later in the month of December. This is just the overview so you guys can get an idea of like how to plan your month if you want to write down the new or the full moon or some of the more prominent transits, especially those of you guys who are traveling, okay? This is a big thing. We are going to see between Mercury going retrograde, travel issues. We're also going to see a ton of planets that are going to be coming into mutable squares between Sun and Venus and Mercury and Sag, making oppositions to Mars retrograde, and all the squares to Neptune tells me extreme weather, some chaos going on possibly with the airports, and possibly some news coming out actually about just some of these really insane cases of people having like respiratory issues, flu stuff, because we're going to see the focal point of these T-squares with Jupiter and Neptune. So we're going to hear travel advisories possibly advising people to be careful as you're traveling. I've heard in some situations, some places are pushing to bring masks back. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm an astrologer, but I can tell you that when we see these squares, we're definitely going to see lots of talk on the news about health and hospitals, but we're also going to be challenging what can be data. And a lot of that is because the mutable squares. So I'll take a look at the chart and show you guys what I'm seeing. Those of you guys who are a part of my Sunday morning crew, good morning if you're watching this. Your morning is starting off with Moon conjunct Pluto. So that energy will shift at the end of today on November the 27th, later in the day when the moon goes into Aquarius. And I just want to kind of touch on, remember guys, these next couple of days, very, very, very powerful as we see the moon come into Aquarius on Monday. It's going to come into conjunction with Saturn, which is usually pretty serious, but it's trining out to Mars retrograde. So that Mars trine Saturn is wonderful energy Monday and Tuesday to get shift done, okay? Focusing on your goals, being able to communicate. I talked a little bit about this last week, kind of anticipating that most of my video would really be about the month of December. So when December starts off, let's kind of go ahead here a little bit. And you'll start to see actually, before we even get to December, on November 30th, the moon will ingress into Pisces, okay? So it's setting the stage emotionally for kind of retreating, meditating, reflecting, isolating. You know, we feel something kind of cycling out when the moon is in Pisces. This will proceed forward into conjunctions with both Neptune and Jupiter going into the very beginning of December. And this is going to be the very first experience you guys are actually going to have with these really significant mutable squares. Just having Jupiter and Neptune alone is quite a bit that you're going to feel like the Mars square that's been extended. We've had lower energy levels. We're changing our mind. We're changing direction with Mars retrograde, but also the squares to both Mercury and Venus, not knowing how to communicate, not knowing how to follow up, feeling like there's something that's changing about our beliefs or our philosophy. So before we even get into December, just observe what's happening on the 30th because you're going to start to feel something change. Now the mutable signs, right? Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces all represent the signs where the season is about to change and something dissolves or something releases, or there is like an integration of a new philosophy, a new belief, a new piece of data, a new solution, right before we then initiate and go into the cardinal signs, which is starting fresh. So what's kind of interesting is that Sag season naturally says, this is what the big picture is. This is what we've learned. This is us reflecting on how the year has been, and talking about travel. It's not just the holidays, but travel is very Sagittarius. Our goals and anything in regards to the future and being more optimistic and bright. You know, we're sending holiday cards and saying to people like, Happy New Year, like may next year, you know, be bright. That's super Sag. So December is going to, especially the first like 2 weeks of December, oh boy, it is going to be a lot. So just take a look at what's happening on December the 1st to give you any indication of what all these mutable T-squares are going to be about. Now looking at my calendar, looks like the first of the month is going to be on a Thursday. So you'll definitely start to feel that energy shift just as these planets are coming into the square. You have already kind of been warned, or I've given you the heads up about how Mercury in opposition to Mars in this most recent week can be a little combative, argumentative, especially seeing Mercury in a Jupiter-based sign has its opinions, right? Fire likes to kind of burn. So having Venus and Mercury moving side by side very closely is everybody's going to have an opinion about how you spend money, what we should value, how we can fix some challenges in regards to the financial system or the legal system or the education system. But Sagittarius as a whole, it has a connection also to teachers, philosophy. It can be very much about debate and debating kind of like the bigger purpose and meaning of life. Definitely like lots of like philosophical conversations and topics that can be kind of going down the entire first half of December. I think that I would just encourage everybody to be respectful of other people's perspectives. It can be really challenging, definitely, especially coming into, you know, the holiday period. You know, the first half of the month, we're going to have a full moon, which is kind of highlighting the fact that a lot of people are going to be making some sudden moves. The full moon will be in Gemini, and coming out with something and having something to say. By the time that full moon is kind of peaking, it'll still be in opposition to Sag and a square to Jupiter and Neptune. So to me, this seems a little bit like the blind faith, the blind leading the blind, people consuming information and just assuming what they're seeing on a screen or what they're hearing is the truth, and not becoming aware of where there can be so much fogginess and potential illusions, and room for manipulation and dishonesty and intentional fogginess, okay? These signs also rule weather. So, you know, when we see storms, we usually see lots of stuff going on with like either Gemini, Pisces, Sag. So I'm aware with Saturn and Pluto in the later degrees of Saturn-based signs, we're going to have a very cold winter. So we're already seeing it in parts of the world. But even more so when we start seeing some of these planets squaring each other, it might start adding in more significant precipitation. So we might start seeing more frost. We might start seeing more snow in some parts of the world. And it can be rather extreme in terms of visibility, which can affect your ability to drive. It can affect your ability to catch a flight and be, you know, able to kind of maintain some of your travel plans. We're going to have, like I said, Mercury going direct. So you will see pretty much early in the month. I'll give you the play-by-play in just a second. You want to, if you're somebody who's really about, you know, getting all your Mercury retrograde stuff done early, ideally you're trying to do this before even the shadow. And if you guys think back to what was happening in 2021, the very beginning, you know, the very end of 2021, going to the beginning of 2022, we were in a Venus and a Mercury retrograde in the sign of Capricorn. Both of these planets were in conjunction to Pluto. So there was like a profound shift of our mind, our information, our goals. I think we were also realizing that the world still wasn't quite opening up yet. Unfortunately, some of the predictions that I have made over this last month are kind of coming to fruition. That Mercury retrograde in Capricorn is going to be talking about data and information and numbers coming out about corporate companies. And that corporate companies are going to be crunching the numbers and looking at the year end and kind of realizing that they're either running out of money, they're having trouble paying employees. I talked about massive layoffs. That's definitely something that's happening across the board with a lot of larger corporate companies. And I think that we're going to be hearing more about this just after the holiday and going into the new year. We will also be seeing that Neptune's going to go direct. So we're going to have the planet of mysticism and dreams and illusions go direct. And when a planet is stationing, which it will be the very first couple days of December, there's going to be an opportunity for us to suddenly be able to kind of like break through and get some clarity. So those of you guys who are really heavy Pisces-based charts, Pisces stelliums, Pisces rising, that'll be really helpful to get your chart ruler direct. And yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of it. So let me take you guys through all of the transits day by day and talk to you about what I have noted here. So we're going to start on December 1st, super active day. I think if those of you guys who saw my horoscopes, you know what I'm talking about. The whole first 2 weeks of the month is very confusing. Okay, so if you're looking at your natal chart, I want you to look at where Pisces is in your chart. Neptune and Jupiter are in this sign for only another couple of weeks together before Jupiter goes into Aries. So those two planets being within 10-degree range of each other is pretty potent. This is telling me that there is still some illusion, or there's still something that's dissolving, or there's still something that's hidden, or something about our intuition, our psychic energies, our receptivity, something that's going on that's outside of ourselves. Prayer, meditation, consciously taking time to reflect and release and let go and really be with our emotions is so incredibly important. This is going to be such a huge theme throughout the first 2 weeks, because as we see these planets really kind of face off in Sagittarius and Gemini, we're not going to know which end is up, right? And we're going to hear a lot of static and a lot of noise in the background. So when you're hearing people debating and bickering things on the internet, when you're hearing it on the news, when you're hearing, people in line at the shopping market that are going back and forth about stuff and talking about what could be conspiracies or what could be, considered truth, nobody knows what is going on. We're not going to have a lot of clarity really until we get to the first 10 days or so of January. So be careful with resharing, posting things. You want to cite your sources, and you probably want to be keeping like religion and politics, or also talking about medicine out of the conversations, because there's definitely going to be a lot of people who are going to get kind of ticked off by the opinions that people are going to be having. Now on December 1st, Venus in Sag moves to make an opposition with Mars. So Venus being about love and harmony and relationships and socializing, standing in the opposite sign of Mars can on one hand represent absence makes the heart grow fonder. So relationships abroad, people who are in two separate places but are missing each other, wanting to come together. This is one of those oppositions that I really like. That's kind of like, okay, we leave in the morning, we go about our duties, we go to work, we do our thing, go home, and then we can finally kind of meet later in the day. Taking a little bit of space or expanding your mind or expanding your philosophy in the Sagittarius area of your life is going to be really helpful to kind of like better make sense of what your life could be. Like this is a very positive stellium of planets that are in Sagittarius, and I'm really digging the fact that it's all coming into sextiles with Saturn. So on one hand, this is like a closing sextile, because we'll see in February and March, planets will come into conjunction with Saturn and it's starting a new phase. But I think that this is like saying like, well, yeah, it's tough out there, but in spite of that, like I'm not losing my optimism. I'm not going to stop praying. I'm not going to stop looking at the glass half full. So there's like a need to be able to kind of keep this fire burning in the Sagittarius area of your chart. Mercury will start coming into a square with Neptune. And this is challenging because there's definitely going to be like tall tales, misinformation. Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius makes me feel like doctors, professors, lawyers, social rights activists, even people who are involved in religion or higher education are somehow going to be feeling challenged by the media, right? Mars opposition, and then the Neptune square. And so you're going to hear more about people being like, I'm putting videos out there, but they're not being seen, or they're getting censored, or they're being removed from platforms, and like things that are also being edited. It's so hard. I mean, I was watching a video the other day that was like showing the future of AI, and that they have programs now where they can basically describe any particular person, right? Age, time period, gender, ethnicity, and then the AI will immediately create like 8 different characters that look super hyper realistic. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that that's kind of what this reminds me of, is like, are they going to be editing and chopping up things and putting it on the mainstream news that is not reality? But it's being like hyper inflated to push a story along. Are there things that are coming from previous postings or previous like news channel interviews that are now being like reused and recycled to kind of like push an agenda now? Possibly. I've been saying this for a month, and now I'm curious to see what's going to happen, because Sagittarius also has connections to airports, pilots, lawyers, people who are going to be either taking a stand or taking us higher in our belief system, or even in elevation. So as these planets are all coming into Sagittarius, opposing Mars is saying that we can be finding that the media is painting these people out to be like the villains, when in reality, there's something else that's going on behind the scenes, because like I said, the focal point is going to be all of these planets that are going to be in Pisces. You know, I'm not one to tell people like what to do. You want to watch the news, watch the news. You don't want to watch the news, don't do it. But this is a time to be very aware of some of the content that's coming out, and whether or not things are intentionally being put out and edited to intentionally stroke fear. Especially with Mars being so strongly connected to war, and Neptune being associated with other countries, and Sagittarius being about, religious stuff. I think we're going to see some kind of like, religious conflict that might break out somewhere, and it makes major headlines. We might see that there's stuff in regards to temples or churches that makes major headlines, and certain groups basically wanting to stand up and challenging the media's narrative, and really calling them out for things that they have been intentionally not including in some of their reports. This same day, the saving grace is at least we have Venus coming into a sextile with Saturn. Now, this is important because, Mars rules the south node, okay? Venus rules the north node in Taurus. And when they're apart, it can almost feel like the beginning of December, we're at a crossroads. There is the past and how we have always done things. Mars in Gemini retrograde is kind of going to come into some inconjuncts with the south node, which means in order to really transform and detox and clear and let go, Mars retrograde in Gemini is saying we have to be honest. We have to be honest with ourselves. We have to admit when we don't know something or we don't know the way forward. We have to be willing to walk back certain conversations and say, hey, I didn't have the facts, or I didn't know, or I was misinformed, and own it. A lot of this is about ownership and the willingness to change our mind, and not be responding and reacting out of fear. You're going to hear a lot of astrologers talk about like Mars retrograde, people are short-tempered and they're aggro and this and that. And like there's some truth to that. But it's also an opportunity to turn inward and go, why did I get angry and say that thing? Or why have I become defensive? Or why do I feel the need to, challenge other people? Keep in mind that whenever you see oppositions, there's going to be extremes, right? We're going to see a lot of extremes. And some of this extremism can be just pure arrogance with all these planets in Sag. And the squares to Neptune tells me that anywhere where you're starting to see like one side or the other of politics, of, belief systems, like religious stuff, like how we're maintaining our relationships with other countries, whatever, you're going to see extremes. And when you're seeing people go to one extreme side or the other, that's where you want to be kind of weary, right? So the key is to find the middle ground in the midst of some of these really challenging oppositions. And, it can be kind of sticky here with Pisces, Neptune and Moon and Jupiter on the first, where you're kind of like, man, I don't know, both sides seem kind of crazy. Like, leave me out of it. And sometimes that's the solution. Sometimes it's like, I'm not even gonna get involved in this because I know it's gonna turn into a whole brouhaha. But it's also, we're walking the line of being like, where are we walking away because we're like, I don't want to get involved, or I don't want to know what's really happening, or I don't want to hear the information that's coming out, or I don't know how to respond. I'm confused. I'm scared. These things can happen with Pisces as well. As we get into next year and Saturn goes into Pisces and other planets start coming into that sign in the early spring, we will find that there is going to be a new normal, right? Saturn in Pisces is going to be like, well, it's normal to be isolated, or it's normal for a lot of people to be sick, or it's normal for, us to have some kind of significant migrations or changes in major religion. And I think that it's kind of being designed that way, as much as I hate to say that. So right now you may find that, the beginning of the month, there is a much more challenging time to kind of wrap your head around what your beliefs are. And people are going to be pushing you to change your mind, or people are going to be arguing with others and trying to kind of state their case. And like, people can just seem flat out like crazy with the Neptune squares. There's no real nice way to put it. But your anchor this month, right, is actually going to be Saturn, because in the midst of all of these squares, we want to make lemonade. So this is where we look at how Sagittarius is sextiling Saturn. It means if you're lighting up the Sagittarius area of your chart, if you're talking about, being about, actively learning, expanding, being more optimistic about that house, it's funneling positive energy into Saturn, saying, yeah, things have been tough, but I have faith they're going to get better. And like, this is what I'm learning to improve, this situation and like stick to my goals. I also like the fact, like I said, that the month kind of kicks off with Mars and Saturn in a trine. So Saturn right now is like pretty much the only one who's kind of steering the ship, unfortunately. So you may find that now that Saturn is direct and it's kind of picking up its momentum, there's some kind of crystallization that's taking place between now and the new year of some new formation or some new goal or some new belief is kind of shaping up and taking place for you. We move to the third of the month and we see that Neptune goes direct in the sign of Pisces. And that will be around 22 degrees right here. When that happens, we still have a ton of planets that are in, fire signs. The moon will have moved into Aries and it's going to make some fire trines, which is really lovely. But still, I think Jupiter moving forward and now Neptune is direct, we may start to see what's been going on behind the scenes globally, right? Or within secret institutions or hospitals or, private prisons or camps or any of these things. And this is also, talking about where people are tuning into higher octaves of spirit. So it can be really positive and off the charts with Neptune and Jupiter direct in Pisces for meditation and sleep and rest and divination, but it can also be really hectic and really chaotic. And we start to kind of realize that in certain parts of the world, there are people who are still being isolated, still being locked down, and almost feeling like they're imprisoned by something. Now, Pisces is emotional, so it can mean that you feel like you're emotionally kind of overflowing with a situation that's going on in your life, or that you're dealing with feeling alone in something, or just having really, really, really strong feelings of being empathic and absorbing, collectively what's kind of going on in the world. Jupiter's going to move pretty quick, so it's not going to be here for very long. Look at where Pisces is in your chart. Know that now that Neptune is direct, it's going to continue to keep moving direct, and we're going to see Saturn go into that sign. So there's going to be a huge buildup towards the Pisces area of your chart in the new year. Strong intuition, gaining clarity, focusing on your dreams, and things becoming more clear. So when a planet stations, you might see the first, second, third, there's this buildup to where Pisces is, and then suddenly it's like something becomes more clear, and it can become more reliable as well, because I find Neptune retrograde is we don't really know what to plan on. This same day, Venus comes into a square with Neptune. So like, too long didn't read. Mars and, Gemini in opposition to Venus and Mercury. Arguments about money, arguments about moving, arguments about cars, challenges with the legal system or filing documents or documents that you need for transportation or, to be able to travel. And all the squares to Neptune, to me, screams the first half of December, like, guys, there's going to be more scams, financial scams. You might hear more about some of these crypto scams and people being able to kind of like get onto platforms or people having stuff that goes missing. This can also be like things getting left at airports, things that go missing from colleges or schools. That might be something else that kind of pops up. And I think we're going to hear more and more and more with Jupiter and Neptune about mass numbers of people that are trying to, you know, move or migrate or go to other countries or go to other places, seeking refuge. That's definitely going to be something that you guys are you're going to hear about over this next month. If you're planning on making a large purchase, if you're planning on buying a big screen TV, if you're planning on dropping $5,000 because you're getting ready to go on a trip to Europe, like these things are all things that, you know, obviously this is general, so what can be challenging just generally can be good for somebody's chart isn't looking so great. So when you're transacting online, when you're inputting your credit card places, when you're moving crypto around, when you're accessing your bank account, all of this stuff, be mindful that all of these things, especially if it involves screens, and especially if it involves you making transactions either on your phone, because Mars is retrograde, or while you're abroad or you're in other places, you're going to see some people are going to have issues with accounts and having access to money because Venus is going to make an opposition to Mars and it's going to square Neptune. Same thing goes if you've got people reaching out to you and being like, hey, you know, like I want to give you a reading, you know, I want to give you a reading. I was drawn to you on the internet. You know, just give me your PayPal and, you know, PayPal me or give me your PayPal and to put on my mailing list and I will, you know, give you a free reading. Any real astrologer that's like, you know, worth their salt, any reader, right? A tarot reader, an astrologer, a medium, these people generally don't just reach out to people on social platforms. That's just not what they do. Myself included, I've had a number of fake accounts on Instagram. I have a feeling this is going to be a really, really, really big theme. So be careful. I also feel like we're going to hear something about some kind of automakers having an issue. I read recently this stuff with like Carvana having major layoffs, but I think we're going to hear more about vehicles and vehicle sales and things kind of declining and challenges just in regards to the travel industry in general. On the 3rd, we see that with Venus coming into the square with Neptune, we can be disappointed by illusions with relationships or possibly even money. So not a great day to be making a big financial transaction. Yes, the moon will be in a trine, but I don't think that's enough. I would rather you guys get Venus out of this square and possibly even out of the square with Jupiter as well. So we're not seeing clearly when it comes to relationships. We're putting people on pedestals or we're seeing what we want to see. That's kind of the feeling that I'm getting. On the 5th, Mercury will hit 29 degrees. Let me move this so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So Mercury hits 29 degrees of Sag on December 5th, and it's going to come into a square with Jupiter at 29 degrees. Now, usually I'm not like that specific, but 29 degrees of the mutable sign is like, everything's about to suddenly change. So Mercury in Sag, Jupiter in Pisces, big information, big news, big leaks, big something. Something big is going to come up in possibly like the global news markets. Same day, the moon will have conjunctions to Uranus and it will square Saturn. So watch for this day on the 5th. Just shortly after that, Mercury will enter into the sign of Capricorn, and this will be the sign that it will retrograde in. If you have any planets between 27 and 29 degrees of the mutable signs, this is one to watch, especially if you are a Sagittarius, Pisces, or Virgo rising. Although Sag, you're a part of that crew too as well. So if you're the later kind of mutable signs, you're going to feel the gears kind of turn this day. And there's some kind of news that affects another area of life and it feels really big. And personally, I feel like this can also be some really wild, crazy claims because Mercury's still in a square to Neptune and that square to Jupiter is kind of like, didn't you hear everybody's doing this thing? Or like that happened. And I could see like news spreading like wildfire, basically. Then we take you to, let's see. So yeah, so then Mercury goes into Capricorn and it will be in that sign clear until January. On the 7th, Sun in Sagittarius moves into an opposition with Mars retrograde. And this will also be the full moon. So the full moon in Gemini that's going to be taking place on the 7th. Looks like it's going to be around 16 degrees. So we've got, obviously, the sun and the moon are always in opposition to each other. That's how we have a full moon. But Mars in conjunction to the moon, very irritating, very quick, very sudden, needing to pivot. And I could see how Mars and Gemini coming into conjunction with the moon. This is a moon ruled by Mercury, and now Mercury is in Capricorn. It's like scheduling changes, work changes, layoffs, people suddenly having to make changes in their health or their day-to-day life. There can be this feeling of like there being this dire situation with a full moon in Gemini. The sun in opposition to Mars also just feels like very competitive. It feels very feisty. It feels like we're challenged. And the way out still, sun sextile Saturn, moon trine Saturn. Saturn is saying consistency, determination, commitment, focus, maturity, staying on task. Finally, we're getting out of these Saturn-Uranus squares. So it's only going to get a little bit easier from here in terms of like those two signs and planets being landlocked. We're not going to have that issue. But still, I feel like this is a full moon that we have to think on our feet. We want to be more mindful and more careful of like media and the news, Gemini, gossip, slander, but also possibly something changing in regards to Gemini related things, vehicles, transportation, documents, information, media, and Mars is cutting, it's severing. So I'm looking at this going like, interesting, like, are we going to hear about certain media networks having issues? Are certain people going to go, you know what, that's it. I'm getting off of this social platform because I don't like what's going on. I don't like the direction that things are going in. So that might be another way that plays out. You don't want to rush. You don't want to be messing around with things that are sharp or hot or anything like that, especially if you have any planets that are going to be really from like 14 to 18 degrees of the mutable signs. You're going to feel that the most. I will be doing a video on that in this next week or so. Then I will take you guys to the 9th. And on the 9th, we're going to have Venus at 29 degrees of Sagittarius square Jupiter at 29 degrees of Jupiter, 29 degrees of Pisces. Hello. So Venus 29. So that's important because it's the North Node ruler. Right after that full moon in Gemini, we will see that the moon will make an opposition to Venus, and it's leaving us wanting more or needing more. So you may find actually that on the evening of the 8th, that opposition and that square leaves a lot of people like on the edge of their seat. Like it might feel like a cliffhanger that's like, oh my God, now what do we do? You know? But yeah, on this particular situation, Venus, which is sweet and expansive and yummy, and it's about relationships, Venus square Jupiter is like the day where you're like, you go to the restaurant and you order all the things, or you overdo the sweets, or you overdo the travel, or you overdo the indulgence. Venus in Sag makes me feel like it's more about spending money on education, spending money on travel. I have a feeling we can hear like there's a lot of people who are upset about getting gouged for flights, and perhaps they're being compensated as a result of flights being oversold. It is possible also that there is just going to be an abundance of people trying to travel, and you might hear more about that out in the news. But yeah, Venus square Jupiter, also a day to kind of not do your Christmas shopping because you'll find that prices are going to be much higher, and you might be a little bit more impulsive when it comes to spending a little bit. Right after this, obviously, Venus will then enter Capricorn. Things are going to get pretty Saturn-ish because we're getting ready to have the Sun, Venus, Mercury all entering into Capricorn, where Pluto is within this month. And then we still have Saturn in Aquarius. So you're going to just notice the shift of being like work, focus, determination, you know, and it is the end of the year, but it just seems a little bit louder than usual to me. And I feel like people are having to work harder to be able to kind of prepare for 2023, especially when it comes to like scheduling. Okay, so on the 12th, we're going to have Mercury enter its shadow period. So as soon as Mercury hits 8 degrees, this is the degree that it will retrograde back to, okay? So those of you guys who are very Mercury based, if you're a Capricorn rising, if you are a Gemini or a Virgo rising, it may benefit you to get ahead of the curve and possibly try to get things in order relating to Mercury before this date. If you don't, it's fine. You can still do it before the Mercury retrograde later in the month, but this is when the shadow begins, which means we can start seeing the effects of the Mercury retrograde early. And I feel like we really are going to feel this because we have Mercury that's coming towards Pluto. So Mercury retrograde, right? The planet of communication, travel, commerce, exchanges, ideas, organization, taking things apart, putting it back together. So when we take Mercury and we put it in a Saturn-based sign, really what it's saying is there's going to be corporate restructuring, there's going to be layoffs, there's going to be bosses and superiors and people who might change positions, quit, leave, retire. But it's also in a sign that's associated with government. So we might be hearing that, you know, there is some people who are stepping down. Likely we are going to hear about scandals because it's all coming into conjunction with Pluto. So financial scandal, financial crimes, tax issues, things that are kind of coming out into the news that's about their involvement potentially with financial stuff. It'll make trines to the North Node as well as Uranus. Also their involvement or their awareness about food shortages. It can also be in relation to pharmaceuticals because of the sextiles that they're going to have to Neptune. We want to reorganize, rework, re-strategize, you know, clean out the closet, like whatever it is that you have to do, especially if it's something that seems like it's a really difficult task or a larger task to take on. We want to do that during the Mercury retrograde. So if you know, right, that you're traveling over the holidays and you're going to be kind of going somewhere and coming back and, you know, you're going to potentially be jumping right back into work in the new year, like it's almost like really good for spring cleaning, but it's in the middle of December. So you may want to spend like the first half of December decluttering, organizing, getting rid of stuff, clearing it out, and becoming very practical. And also Capricorn can be like very frugal. So there can be a sense of being like, do we need to spend this much money on this gift? Do we have to be, you know, going crazy and having a big party? You know, how can we find efficient ways to be able to kind of socialize or do business and have a good time without breaking the bank? I think that for the most part, you know, even in spite of the Mercury retrograde kind of being annoying, yes, we see travel delays, we see cars break down, we see hard drives, you know, also have issues. Being, you know, given this information in advance is really, really helpful, and it can help people kind of plan travel better. If you know that you're going somewhere and it makes sense to get, you know, refundable tickets, or if it makes sense to double check your bookings or to make sure and confirm that you're going to have, you know, a car that's going to be ready. I am anticipating that when Mercury gets ahead and it starts creating inconjuncts to Mars, there can be a demand for rental cars and some airports may not have it. There can be a demand for Ubers. In some places, we're not going to see as many people Ubering, or there's going to be a limit or a setback when it comes to transportation. Now, this isn't limited to just cars. This can also be production of parts relating to cars, relating to gadgets and other technology. We may also find that there is something shifting or changing within, you know, our government system about how we can either move freely or communicate freely. So a lot of this is just like going to be about freedom to kind of move around. Because it's the holiday season and we'll be in the midst of a Mercury retrograde, I really advise everybody, if you're giving gifts, give somebody the gifts, or like give them the gift receipt. Some people think it's tacky, whatever, or if you don't know what to get somebody, get them a gift card, because that can be really helpful, because I could see more exchanges and more returns taking place this holiday season as a result of Mercury going retrograde in conjunction to Venus. We'll look at that when we get closer to the dates at the end of the month. But equally, okay, when we're in the midst of Mercury retrograde, buying a big screen TV or an expensive Mac computer or buying the brand new iPhone, I would always say, it doesn't matter when it is, like make sure that you're getting your receipt, make sure that you save the box. If you need to register for a warranty, do that, you know. And don't just throw everything away, because if something's not working, you want to be able to return it. Or if you don't like something, you want to be able to exchange it. All right, so now we move to, one other thing. The sun will sextile Saturn this day. So it's a great working day for getting things done. It's really helpful, I think, for being able to remain positive and optimistic and kind of sticking to timelines and sticking to goals. And, the sun is highlighting, finally, now that we're out of all these oppositions, our ability to go further, go higher, to be more curious, to explore, to be able to expand in that part of your chart, wherever Sag is. All right, so then we move to the 14th, and the sun starts coming into a square with Neptune. Not the best day for details, okay? Whether you have a Mercury square, a sun square, because these are two placements that deal with information and identity and energy, the squares to Neptune can kind of take the winds out of your sails a little bit. It can make you a little bit more exhausted, and it does create some visibility issues. But I think that for the most part, this is like allowing yourself to take the road less traveled, taking the long way home, being more open and feeling more inspired. It can be wonderful for daydreams, inspiration, music, travel, like anything like that. But it's not great for getting down to details. So this is a day that I would not make any big, major life-changing decisions until we get out of this square. You may even see it kind of go into the 15th now that I look at it, because like I said, the first half of the month is like, oh my gosh, opposition square galore. And you'll notice that when the moon goes through Virgo, it will be the first, or I guess the last quarter square since the full moon. So this is where things are kind of breaking down, and it'll create a grand mutable cross. So all of the mutable signs are really going to feel that on the 15th. And it really won't be until we start getting the moon and other planets that are kind of moving ahead in degrees that things are going to start kind of making sense, basically. Mercury on the 15th is in a trine to the North Node. So I like that. I feel like that's about being able to have boundaries, be serious, make serious plans, be committing to something that's more solid, be organizing. I mean, a lot of people are going to benefit from making a budget and sticking to it from the holiday season. They're going to make also their lives a whole lot easier when it comes to figuring out new and inventive ways to be able to make things as gifts. I could see Taurus being about, well, I've made you this thing. It can also be a period where people are really kind of using information and data and stuff that's coming to kind of better plan, stuff that's coming out in the news or in the markets to better plan for, the next couple of quarters into 2023 when it comes to spending. As much as I hate to say it, we're going to see things get kind of rocky here with Mercury retrograde conjunct Pluto. Like, a lot of people are going to be really optimistic that, the holiday sales are going to do very well, and that everybody's gonna be buying stuff, and we're not. I really find it hard to believe that we're gonna hear that. I think we're gonna see across the board that people are buying, but they're not buying like they used to, and we're still trying to pull ourselves out of what has been 2 years of just some really economic times, and it's all starting to catch up with us as we get to the beginning of 2023. So be very careful with your purchases right now. I feel like we're kind of on the brink of some banking systems or some major banks realizing that they don't have the capabilities to be able to keep things running, and they may be asking for government bailouts. So we might be hearing about how they're kind of talking about this, or they're having issues potentially with being able to kind of fund things. We will also see a couple days later, Mercury will come into a trine with Uranus. And so perhaps maybe this will also be more in the news in regards to like the crypto markets and like, what politicians are saying needs to be done moving forward when it comes to some of these new potential pilot programs for cryptocurrencies and digital coins. I know from what I understand, they're kind of trying this out for a couple of weeks, but we may hear a little bit of news about that. Makes me nervous, the fact that it's a Mercury retrograde, because, Mercury's in shadow. So it's like whatever they say, they're going to go back and forth on really until we get to about the end of January. So I'd be careful about what I'm listening to, because we don't have all the facts and the figures yet. On the 20th, We're then going to have Jupiter in Aries for the third and final time come into Aries. So it's been in and out for this last year. Now it's back. It's here to stay until the spring. Those of you guys who are, 0 to 3 degrees of the cardinal signs, so Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, you guys are going to feel this more strongly. Obviously, Jupiter is about expansion and knowledge and information and wisdom and positive things. It's a planet that's associated with abundance. And in the sign of Aries, it's very courageous, it's bold, it's independent, it's entrepreneurial. It's also going to be about self-rights and self-governing. So you're going to hear more about, lots of new rules and regulations that are getting ready to be implemented. And people are going to have really strong feelings about some of this stuff. But look at where Jupiter is in Aries in your chart. It's been a couple of like false starts, and now that Jupiter is going in fully into Aries and it's going to be there for a couple months, between now and about April, you're going to start to see something really significant and more positive that's emerging. But it does require you to take action on your part to be able to go and create your own luck. Then we have pretty much the next day, and I'll really get into this in another video, but we're going to have the sun come into Capricorn. So this is going to be on December 21st in the afternoon, at least here on the Pacific coast. And this is what we call the winter solstice, okay? So this is when the sun enters into the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is a cardinal earth sign. It's about our career, our determination, our goals, our legacy, our public, kind of persona. And it does deal with like bosses and people who are in charge or superiors of some kind, people who wear uniforms, generals, politicians, that kind of stuff. So I like to look at the solstice and the equinox charts because it gives me an idea of what we're dealing with for the next like 3 months until we come into the next season. So what we will have in the spring is the beginning of the astrological year when the sun goes into Aries. So this kind of represents like what we're closing out, right? We've got Capricorn through Aries. So Capricorn is like the peak, what we've been building towards, responsibility. Aquarius season is going to be about goals and something that's kind of getting solid. And then Pisces season is where we kind of release and we let something go. If you look at this chart, right, we've got a stellium of planets in Capricorn, Saturn in Aquarius, and we've got Jupiter that's hanging out in Pisces. And we're going to see these planets all move here and make contact with some big outer planets. So all the way up until we get to, March, April of next year, we're winding some things down. There are some big global events that are going to happen with some of these planets that are going to be in the late degrees. So yeah, busy period of time. Not only will it be the solstice, so it represents kind of the longest, darkest period without the light is only going to grow, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, from here until the spring. So it's interesting to look at the ruler Saturn being in its home sign, Aquarius, but the sun is going to be in a square to Jupiter. Wow. Changes and action in the Capricorn area of your life, bringing on some kind of new expansion or some new opportunity in the Aries part of your chart. The sun squares, Jupiter twice a year. It makes an opposition as well. This is more action oriented. So it's like nobody gets a pass. Look at where Capricorn is in your chart. There is a Saturn goat party taking place. All this action with a Mercury retrograde, conjunctions to Pluto, all prompting the square to Jupiter. And oh, by the way, we're going to have the moon in Sag. And it's a balsamic moon because we're just getting ready to come into a new moon phase. So it's kind of a little eerie whenever you see like the sun go into a sign and then the moon shows up. We just had this recently with Sagittarius season. That was fun, watching the moon go through Scorpio, and then boom, we had the Sag new moon. Grumpy, we can feel a little grumpy. And I think with the sun in a square to Jupiter, there is this feeling of being overly optimistic, idealizing something, assuming that, best case scenario is going to happen. And there's just actions have consequences. So be mindful around the 21st that there is almost 2 new opportunities shaping up in both Aries and Capricorn in your chart. Then on the 22nd, we are going to see Venus in Capricorn come into a trine with Uranus. I guess I should note, Venus will trine the North Node. That'll be on the 19th. And that's good for money and relations, but it's more spiritual because it's at a 12. Venus comes into a trine with Uranus, so positive shifts in money and resources, having breakthroughs in relationships and also creative projects. But breakthroughs, I think, with solutions when it comes to finances and also like career or reputation. We make changes in the food we like, the clothes that we wear. We see that we have breakthroughs in how we're communicating with people. So that can be a really positive trine. And then on the 23rd, we're going to see that Chiron will go direct in Aries. So it will now be direct at 11 degrees. It'll receive a square from the moon. And the same day, we're going to have a new moon in Capricorn. And that's going to be at 1 degree. Okay. So let me roll this back so you guys can see that. There we go. So the new moon will be at 1 degrees of Capricorn, still in a square to Jupiter. So very big energy leading up to Christmas. And, you know, Capricorn's about responsibility, tradition, right? There's a reason why when we're in Capricorn season, at least here in the Northern Hemisphere, I know we have some Aussies and some other people who are south of the equator. We find that, you know, we're not working, we're taking time off, we're with our families for the holidays. Seems very opposite, right, of Capricorn. But that's because the Earth is actually in Cancer. So we're physically spending more time at home, we're with our family, and we're reflecting and seeing lots of action in the area of tradition. We go back home, we see family, we go back and we visit friends. We have traditions that we do during the holidays. We put up wreaths or trees or stockings or whatever it is that you do. That is tradition. So we're going to be really looking at the end of the year, what are our traditions? What are our goals? What have we always done? Where have we become really fixated on, you know, doing something the old-fashioned way? And whether or not we're going to continue to keep doing things that way. Just some things that you may find yourself kind of talking about. Chiron goes direct, so it's really putting an emphasis on healing. And a new moon in Capricorn, obviously the star is going to be Saturn, and Saturn is second house to this moon. So all these planets in Capricorn, 12th house to Saturn, oh boy. That tells me that there's something very big brewing that, let's just call them global people who are kind of running things globally, global elites, you know, major meetings of prime ministers and people who are kind of like running the show are going to be meeting and discussing things. You know, the last time we had this retrograde, we didn't find out about it until the spring. But when all of those documents got released, the leak, we found out that there was a lot of talk about this move with the Supreme Court to try to potentially overturn Roe versus Wade and kind of holding back on releasing some of that information about the decisions relating to abortion, right? Capricorn is a feminine sign. So I'm watching some similar things happen where Venus and Mercury are getting close to Pluto and it's going to retrograde. So we could see major changes in government officials, major changes in government decisions, funding, going back and asking for more money, stuff changing in regards to tax and financial law. And it can be that there are some judges or generals that might be stepping down possibly, yeah. But yeah, looking at this stellium of planets in Capricorn, it's going to be hard to miss how much work and determination and focus is going into that area of your chart. So take a look. Now, then on the 24th through the 28th, a little bit of a broader window there. Here we go. We're going to see Mercury and Venus in Capricorn, sextile Neptune and Pisces. So Mercury is coming into a sextile with Neptune. This is about, you know, doing the work necessary to make the vision happen. Keep in mind, Mercury is still in shadow. It's getting ready to turn retrograde. So it's like, did I see that clearly? Did I read the details? Am I missing something? Or I had a dream and I had this vision of something, so let me go to work on it. So that's really great for kind of tying in like Capricorn's like really practical kind of grounded approach to business and communications, and then Neptune's about inspiration. I like that for writers. I like that for creatives. I also like that for getting serious about creating your dream, What I like about the next like 2 years is we're going to see a handful of planets that are going to be in Pisces sextiling Uranus and then eventually Jupiter in Taurus. So when I think of the relationship between Pisces and Taurus, is Pisces is like the reading that you get, it's the dream that you have, the vision that you have, the hopes, the inspiration, the commitment to the spiritual work that's paving the way to go and actually build something that's solid, right? So we actually really need to be super grounded in our spiritual routines or our meditation practice. We need to be resting better. We need to be consciously taking time to be alone so we're not getting swamped and kind of slimed by other people's emotions. So you'll see that sextile, and then within a couple days, you'll also see Venus come into the sextile with Neptune, which I like. Great for harmonizing, being able to socialize, spending time with other people, people having similar tastes and preferences kind of going down. So that's really nice, especially the 27th and into the 28th. Something I want to note also for those of you guys who care, on the 24th, this is interesting. So we're going to have on Christmas Eve, if you celebrate Christmas Eve, the moon is going to come in conjunction with Mercury. So lots of emotional information, plans, strategizing. I mean, I could see some people working the holidays and that being like not great, or not being thrilled about that. And we also see that the moon will come into conjunction with Pluto later in the evening. So here we are, Christmas Eve, moon is in between Mercury and Pluto, like getting stressed out trying to give grandma directions somewhere, you know, or like having an issue with a car breaking down. And then the moon conjunct Pluto, that Hades moon, is also very intense. I'm not one to tell people what to do, but if you're kind of like, well, do we do something on Christmas Eve or do we do something on Christmas Day? Christmas Day. Wait until the moon gets into Aquarius. If you wake up on Christmas Day, at least the moon is moving away from Pluto and it's inching its way towards Saturn. It's making a sextile to Jupiter. Yeah, I feel like whether this is just bickering among, family members, people having to work late, work getting, in the way of being able to spend time with loved ones, getting older family members and relatives around in a more comfortable setting. Pick people up early and have Christmas on Christmas Day. Don't be trying to like make all this food and doing this stuff on Christmas Eve, because I feel like there's going to be some really heated emotional exchanges, and it can be a little bit of like a battle with older relatives as well. If you don't take my word for it, if you're watching this on Sunday morning, the moon is conjunct Pluto and we're just feeling a little emotionally tense. Okay, now imagine putting the sun and Venus and Mercury there. It's going to be even more so. So yeah, celebrate on Christmas Day. At least you're going to have the moon in a sign that's going to be more social. Then on the 29th, there we go. We're going to have Mercury retrograde. So Mercury will start going retrograde. And it's so interesting. Mercury is going to go retrograde at 24 degrees. Okay, so the shadow will be 24 to 8 degrees. And it's going to go retrograde into January. So it'll actually go direct on January 18th. Still has shadow until the end of the month. So just figure it's going to be kind of working itself out till February. But when Mercury turns retrograde, it's going to be actually right in front of Venus. So it's saying, actually, I don't like the color of the car that you bought me for Christmas. If you're kind enough, to have somebody who gifts you one. Actually, the sweater is too small. Oh, this isn't the desktop computer that I wanted. And people trying to return things or get exchanges. Yeah, all the more reason to make sure that you're giving gift receipts, and be careful when it comes to the tricks that Mercury can be playing, because Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus is like, oh, where did I put my wallet? I don't know where it is. And you realize that you left it in the care of somebody else who has it in their purse. But it's a time to rethink and reanalyze and restructure what we value. And I think Venus in Capricorn, a Saturn-based sign, is tradition. It's commitment. It can be also timelines and things like that. So we're going to find ourselves possibly even reminiscing, thinking about the past, thinking about people in the past, thinking about our goals. And I could definitely see, as we are getting into New Year's on the 31st, then we have Venus coming into conjunction with Pluto. So it's like obsessive, fixated, lots of scandal, things coming out. Mercury can be social media. I can definitely see this being some drama on New Year's Eve of somebody saying to you, oh, you know, I'm not available to go out and go to a party or do this and that. And then you're scrolling through Instagram and you're like, who is that girl that he's with? He told me he wasn't doing anything type of vibes. Not to be negative. I'm just letting you guys know. Moon will be in Aries, and Moon is going to come into a square with Venus and Pluto. So, you know, it's like there can be lots of tense exchanges with, well, if you care, you'll make the time, you'll be with me on New Year's. I hear a lot of that. Or people who are just having these profound realizations that, you know, what they're wanting and what they're needing, they may not feel like they're actually getting from certain relationships or from bosses. It can also be people finding out while we're making cutbacks, we're not giving as much bonuses, right? We're rethinking with Mercury retrograde, the conjunction to Venus, what we're actually able to give out. And then Venus will come into conjunction with Pluto. Be very careful because, you know, the moon is going to change signs on New Year's Eve. So it'll be in a square in the early morning. Looks like it's going to dip into Taurus around 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then the moon is going to come into conjunction with its own north node later in the evening. So moon conjunct its own north node, stable, solid, secure, grounded, right? Trining the sun. Actually not bad. I feel like this could be better than Christmas or Christmas Eve for sure. But still, the Venus-Pluto aspect makes me feel like there can definitely be some really intense kind of scandalous things or uncovering something, some difficult truths when it comes to relationships. And also, I think a lot of people, finally, if you found yourself in a situation at the beginning of 2022 with this Mercury retrograde in Capricorn we had, where you're like, that's it, I'm giving my job one more year and then I'm done. And now the year is up and you're like, okay, I still feel the same way. Like now I have to do it. You can go back and watch my videos from 1 year ago. And I remember telling people, pay attention to what you don't like right now, because 1 year from now, you could very well be in the same situation. If you made the change, good on you. If you're still in the process of that, of breaking up with a bad job or having it out with a boss, or, you know, recognizing and going like, this doesn't bring me security, or this doesn't make me feel safe, or I'm not getting paid enough for this, then it's your opportunity to kind of work some of this stuff out. I like the sun and the trine to the moon. That makes me feel better about New Year's, because having the moon square Pluto makes me feel like lots of just drama leading up to the 31st. But as the moon goes through the north node and also Uranus, before it comes into a square with Saturn, it's saying, are we eating well? Are we staying grounded? Are we focusing on security? Are we implementing the element of earth? So wearing your crystals, being outside, you know, being able to work with flowers and grounding foods and aromatherapy. And perhaps maybe the Venus-Pluto aspect is like this aspect of kind of really getting back down to basics and realizing that tradition doesn't have to be over the top and super expensive. Sometimes less is more. And we start focusing more on quality, right, with Venus in Capricorn, rather than, you know, being able to keep up with the Joneses and having people feeling like they need to compete with one another, right? So hopefully you guys are doing something super grounded. I'm liking also the sextiles that are happening to Neptune. So very nice for having a few cocktails, having some good music, and doing something that might be like a little bit more closer to home. And yeah, you're going to hear as soon as these sextiles start happening, because Venus can also be connected to health, that they may be trying to roll out new health measures and talking about, you know, issues with people having respiratory viruses, because Mercury can be about the lungs and breathing. And Venus, being the ruler of the North Node, conjunct Uranus, can be also lots of fluctuations happening with money and resources in the new year. Obviously, I'll be back, you know, I'll be talking to you guys. I want to talk about more of the solstice chart, and we'll be breaking some of these aspects down throughout the month. If you're wanting to know how this affects your personal rising sign, go and watch my horoscopes video. It's over 3.5 hours. We have it bookmarked, so you guys can look just at your sun, moon, and your rising sign, just to get an idea how to better kind of navigate. Plan ahead for this Mercury retrograde, because it is going to be a doozy. There's going to be facts and information and secrets and scandal that's going to be coming out. And you guys don't want to be caught off guard. You know what I'm saying? Just some new things briefly on the channel. Sunday, today, and Monday for Cyber Monday will be the last 2 days that I'm having on my sale on my website. All my courses on sale. My new Astro 201 course that's going to be starting in January, I'm offering $100 off. It's the most affordable you guys are going to find it. Everything is only going to be on sale until Monday. After that, the prices are going to go back to their usual prices. So if you want to study with me live and work with me over a period of 8 weeks in 2023 to learn about lunar returns, solar returns, making predictions, looking at transits the way that I do, join me. I'd love to have you as a student. And if you haven't seen any of my other courses, you can check out my beginner's astrology, tarot as well. I have both of those, the 101 available. We also have a discount on my digital calendar. So if you want to get my calendar for the digital version, we have that discounted. Or if you want to get the physical form, you can get that as well. And yeah, other than that, otherwise, I will be back intermittently throughout this next week, putting together a video, talking to you guys more about the mutable squares and also this upcoming full moon in Gemini. How are you feeling with energy? How's it going? Let me know. Leave me your comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Remember that sharing is caring. So if you want to send this to somebody else or give me a thumbs up and interact, any interaction with the channel really helps, as does all of your guys' memberships, your support. And if you want to show up on my live Saturday nights and get a reading, if you want to book a one-on-one reading with me, check out my links below. You can click beyondtheveil.com, go to my book a reading page, and you'll be able to see my availability in real time, booking into March of 2023. All right, that's it for me. I hope it's a happy new year for you guys. I hope it's a good December. Stay open, question things the first half of the month. And yeah, enjoy the month of December. I hope it's magical for you. I'll see you guys soon. Take care.